Case number 1, Patrick Nogueira, September 18, 2016. Spanish police forced entry into an apartment in Pios, a quiet suburb outside Guadalajara. Neighbors had reported an unbearable smell days earlier. What officers found inside would become one of Spain's most disturbing crime scenes in recent history. 4 bodies, 2 adults dismembered methodically, their remains stuffed into plastic garbage bags, 2 children, ages 3 and 1, wrapped separately. The apartment had been locked for a month. Decomposition was so advanced that initial identification proved difficult. Blood evidence throughout multiple rooms suggested extreme, sustained violence. Investigators initially theorized drug cartel involvement. Within 72 hours, DNA evidence would dismantle that theory. The genetic material matched samples from a residence in Alcalá de Henares. The person who lived there was a 19-year-old nephew of the victims, a young man who had fled to Brazil the day after bodies were discovered. His name was François Patrick Nogueira Gouveia. The WhatsApp messages he sent to a friend in Brazil during the murders would prove to be chilling evidence. Marcos Campos Nogueira was 40 years old when he died. He had emigrated from northeastern Brazil to Spain seeking better opportunities. He worked as an administrator, earning modest but stable income. His wife, Daynes Santos Americo, was 39. Together they were raising Maria Carolina, 3, and Davy, 1. The family had moved to Pios in July of 2016. They represented the immigrant success story, building a life through discipline and sacrifice. Their only mistake was extending hospitality to a relative who needed help. Patrick was born November 6, 1996, in João Pessoa, Brazil. He grew up wealthy, wanting for nothing material. But at 16, he stabbed a teacher. After youth detention and psychiatric care, his family sent him to Europe hoping for a fresh start. In March of 2016, he moved in with Marcos and Janena in Spain. Patrick contributed nothing to the household. He spent days in his room living off his father's money. His behavior disturbed Janena. He walked around in his underwear despite requests to stop. He made inappropriate comments about the children. Once, he casually suggested the children could be taken to freeze to death or be kidnapped. Marcos confronted him, saying he would report Patrick for deportation when his visa expired. Patrick began planning. He researched violent methods online. He confided in a friend in Brazil, Marvin Henriques Correia. Patrick discussed his growing hatred for the family. Marvin did not alert authorities. Marvin encouraged him. Patrick purchased supplies: a large knife, gloves, garbage bags, duct tape. Marcos had welcomed Patrick when he arrived. He provided shelter without asking rent. The move to Pios in July was partially motivated by desire to create distance from Patrick. The family moved without telling him the exact address. Patrick found them anyway. On August 17, Patrick contacted them saying he wanted to visit. Janena agreed, still believing in family reconciliation. Patrick arrived around 7 in the evening carrying pizzas and his backpack containing the knife and supplies. While Janena washed dishes, Patrick struck. He stabbed her twice in the neck. She collapsed. Maria Carolina and Davi witnessed their mother's murder. They screamed, hugged each other, stood paralyzed. Patrick turned the knife on them. 3-year-old Maria Carolina, 1-year-old Davi, both stabbed in the neck. Both died within moments. Patrick sent a message to Marvin describing what he had done. Marvin responded with encouragement. Patrick waited hours for Marcos to return from work. When his uncle arrived around 9 that evening, Patrick attacked. 14 stab wounds to the neck. Marcos fought but had no weapon. No warning. No chance. Patrick spent the next hours dismembering the adult bodies. He placed the remains in garbage bags. He wrapped the children separately. He cleaned blood from surfaces. Throughout this process, he sent messages to Marvin, including photographs. At dawn on August 18th, Patrick locked the door and took a bus back to Alcalá de Henares. He went to play soccer. For the next month, he maintained normal routine. He sent text messages from Marcos's phone claiming illness. He responded to concerned messages from Brazil. He maintained the illusion everything was fine. Meanwhile, 4 bodies decomposed in the sealed apartment. Family in Brazil grew concerned when they could not reach Marcos and Janaina. On September 18th, they requested a welfare check. Police forced entry. DNA from Patrick's previous residence matched the scene. Immigration records showed he fled to Brazil on September 20th. His WhatsApp messages to Marvin documented everything. Brazil prohibits extradition of citizens. Patrick could remain free unless he returned voluntarily. Patrick's sister, a lawyer, convinced him Spanish prisons were preferable to Brazilian ones. She explained what awaited someone convicted of murdering children in Brazil. On October 19, 2016, Patrick voluntarily surrendered to Spanish authorities. The trial took place in Guadalajara from October through November of 2018. Patrick had confessed within days of returning. The defense argued brain damage and alcoholism. Psychiatric evaluators appointed by prosecution found Patrick competent and fully aware of his actions. The jury of 7 men and 2 women deliberated 13 hours across 2 days. On November 3rd, they announced their verdict. Guilty on all counts. The verdict was unanimous. The jury found multiple aggravating factors: treachery, premeditation, particular cruelty toward minors, abuse of family trust. Judge Maria Elena Mayor Rodrigo delivered sentence on November 15th for the murders of Maria Carolina, Davy, and Marcus. Patrick received 3 life sentences. For Janaina's murder, an additional 25 years. Under Spanish law, his first possible parole review would occur in 2043. Even then, review does not guarantee release. In November 2021, Patrick was attacked by approximately a dozen inmates. He spent 4 days hospitalized. Officials attributed the attack to jail law, where prisoners who harm children face retribution. After recovery, Patrick was transferred to isolation. As of today, Patrick Nogueira remains in Spanish custody. He is 29 years old. He will be at least 47 before any review. The families in Brazil lost 5 people in one night. The apartment in Pios was demolished. A documentary series explored the case, focusing on Marvin's role. Marvin was investigated but acquitted. He remains free in Brazil. The case raised questions about digital age complicity that remain largely unanswered. Case number 2. Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb. May 21, 1924. 14-year-old Bobby Franks walked home from school through Chicago's affluent Kenwood neighborhood. It was a warm spring afternoon. The route was familiar. Bobby had made this walk hundreds of times. A rental car pulled alongside him. Inside were 2 young men Bobby recognized. They were neighbors. One was a distant cousin. They offered a ride. Bobby accepted without hesitation. Within minutes, he was dead, struck from behind with a chisel. His body would be discovered the next day in a culvert near the Indiana border. His killers had stripped his clothing and poured acid on his face to prevent identification. They believed they had planned the perfect crime. They believed their superior intellects had anticipated every variable. The investigation would lead to 2 of Chicago's wealthiest families. 2 university students with genius-level IQs who had convinced themselves they were Nietzschean supermen above ordinary morality. They were wrong on every count. Robert Franks was born in 1909 to Jacob and Flora Franks. His father manufactured watches. The family lived comfortably in Kenwood. Bobby attended the Harvard School for Boys. He performed well academically without being exceptional. He was polite, engaged, pleasant. He was a normal, happy 14-year-old with 3 older siblings who adored him. His parents provided structure and affection without excessive indulgence. Bobby was positioned for an excellent future. On May 21st, he left school thinking perhaps about baseball or homework. When the familiar car pulled up, he saw no danger. Nathan Leopold Jr. was born November 19, 1904. His family's wealth was substantial. His father owned a shipping company. Young Nathan was a child prodigy, speaking 15 languages by his teens. He graduated from the University of Chicago at 18, but Nathan's brilliant mind had developed disturbing patterns. He discovered Friedrich Nietzsche and misunderstood the philosophy entirely. He convinced himself that superior intellects like his placed certain people above ethical constraints. He believed conventional morality did not apply to him. Richard Loeb was born June 11, 1906. His father was vice president of Sears, Roebuck and Company. Richard graduated from university at 17, the youngest in the school's history. He was handsome, charming, socially adept. But Richard's charm concealed complete absence of empathy. People were objects to be manipulated or discarded. Nathan and Richard developed an intense friendship based on intellectual compatibility. They discussed philosophy and literature at levels their peers could not match. Gradually, they convinced each other their superior intellects made them fundamentally different from ordinary people. They discussed the concept of the perfect crime. They debated whether someone sufficiently intelligent could commit an act and evade detection. These discussions moved from theoretical to practical. Bobby Franks was selected through calculation and opportunism. Leopold and Loeb needed a victim from their own neighborhood to demonstrate fearlessness. They needed someone young enough to control, someone from a wealthy family to facilitate ransom and generate publicity. Richard was actually Bobby's distant cousin. This connection made Bobby nearly perfect. On May 21st, they drove their rented car through Kenwood looking for a victim. They spotted Bobby walking alone. He was the right age. He came from the right family. Richard knew him personally. They pulled alongside and offered a ride. Bobby accepted. Richard struck him from behind with the chisel they had prepared. The blow killed Bobby almost instantly. They drove to Wolf Lake near the Indiana border. They stripped Bobby's body. They poured hydrochloric acid over his face. They stuffed him into a drainage culvert. They believed they had eliminated every risk. They returned to Chicago and mailed a ransom note to Jacob Franks, demanding $10,000. Bobby's body was discovered the following day by a laborer. Despite the acid, identification was made through dental records. The Franks family was notified. The ransom became irrelevant. The perfect crime had already failed. Then investigators found eyeglasses near the culvert. Horn-rimmed frames with an unusual hinge mechanism. Only 3 pairs with this exact hinge had been sold in Chicago. One belonged to Nathan Leopold. Detectives questioned him on May 29th. Nathan explained he birdwatched in that area. He provided an alibi. He said he spent the afternoon with Richard Loeb. But under repeated interrogation, small inconsistencies emerged. The story began crumbling. On May 31st, after 12 hours of sustained interrogation, both confessed. Each tried to minimize his own role. Nathan claimed Richard wielded the chisel. Richard claimed Nathan planned everything. Both admitted being present. Both admitted concealing the body. Both admitted the ransom note. The families hired Clarence Darrow, America's most famous defense attorney. Darrow understood pursuing not guilty was impossible. His clients had confessed. Evidence was overwhelming. Public outrage demanded justice. His only hope was saving their lives. Darrow advised them to plead guilty, removing guilt from a jury and placing sentencing with a judge. The sentencing hearing lasted over a month in summer 1924. Darrow presented psychiatric testimony suggesting both suffered from mental abnormalities. He argued their privilege and intelligence had created dangerous detachment from reality. He pleaded for their lives not because they deserved mercy, but because he opposed capital punishment on principle. State's Attorney Robert Crowe argued for execution. These young men had every advantage and used those advantages to commit evil. Their intelligence made them more culpable, not less. They deserved the ultimate penalty. Darrow's closing argument lasted 12 hours. It remains one of the most celebrated speeches in American legal history. He spoke about youth, mental illness, and the futility of revenge. He asked Judge Caverly to spare 2 lives, not because they deserved it, but because killing them would accomplish nothing. Judge John Caverly deliberated for weeks under enormous public pressure. On September 10, 1924, he announced his decision. Life imprisonment for murder plus 99 years for kidnapping. He stated explicitly his decision was based solely on their youth. They were 18 and 19 years old. That age alone saved them from execution. Richard Loeb did not survive long. On January 28, 1936, he was attacked by inmate James Day in the shower. Day slashed Loeb's throat with a razor. Loeb bled to death. He was 30 years old. The official ruling was self-defense. Prison justice had been served. Nathan Leopold became a model prisoner. He worked in the prison hospital. He volunteered for malaria research during World War II. He taught inmates. He expressed profound remorse. In 1958, after 33 years, he was paroled. He moved to Puerto Rico, worked in hospital administration, and married. He wrote an autobiography reflecting on his crime. He died of natural causes on August 29, 1971, at age 66. Bobby Franks is buried in Rose Hill Cemetery. His mother lived until 1952, mourning 28 years. His father died in 1941, 17 years after the murder. No punishment could return their son. The case became a landmark in American legal history, establishing precedent for psychiatric evidence and becoming central to capital punishment debates. Case number 3. Brian Blackwell. September 5, 2004. Police in Merseyside, England. Forced entry into a bungalow in Melling Village. A neighbor reported a terrible smell. Inside, officers found 2 badly decomposed bodies. Sidney Blackwell, 72, sat in his chair, still clutching eyeglasses. His wife Jacqueline, 61, lay face down in the bathroom. Decomposition suggested weeks. Brutality suggested extreme violence. The investigation focused on their son, Brian, 18, who had just received straight A grades and been accepted to study medicine at Nottingham. He had been living with his girlfriend's family for 3 weeks, claiming his parents were vacationing in Spain. While their bodies decomposed, before spending £30,000 of their money on luxury trips to America, Sidney was a retired accountant known as Big Brain. Jacqueline was a former antiques dealer. They had Brian when Sidney was 54. They were protective to the point of controlling, monitoring every detail of Brian's life. They believed strict supervision ensured success. Brian was born in 1986. He excelled academically and won tennis championships. But he lived in fantasy. He told classmates he was a professional tennis player with major sponsorships. He claimed extraordinary wealth. None true. By 18, he had accumulated significant debt using credit cards fraudulently in his father's name. When his parents discovered the fraud, confrontation became inevitable. On July 25, 2004, the confrontation turned fatal. Brian used a claw hammer and carving knife. Sidney was struck over 30 times. When Jacqueline investigated, Brian attacked her, approximately 20 blows with the hammer. Then repeated stabbings. Brian left their bodies, packed for America. The next morning, July 26th, Brian and girlfriend Amal flew to New York in business class. For 2 weeks, they stayed at the Plaza Hotel, traveled to Miami, San Francisco, and Barbados. Brian spent £30,000 on his father's cards. Amal suspected nothing. Brian told her the trip was paid by tennis sponsors. He said his parents extended their Spain holiday. On September 5th, a neighbor noticed the smell. Police discovered the bodies in advanced decomposition. The summer heat had accelerated the process. Brian was arrested the following day. After 2 days of interrogation, he confessed but claimed self-defense. Forensic evidence contradicted every detail. Psychiatric evaluations diagnosed severe narcissistic personality disorder. His pathological lying, inability to distinguish fantasy from reality, complete lack of empathy. The defense requested murder charges be reduced to manslaughter on grounds of diminished responsibility. After reviewing psychiatric evidence, prosecution agreed to accept the guilty plea. The hearing took place at Liverpool Crown Court in June 2005. Judge Henry Loeb heard testimony about Brian's mental state, but he also heard about what Brian did after the killings: the luxury holiday, the spending spree, the elaborate lies, the complete absence of remorse. These suggested calculation and awareness. On June 29, 2005, Judge Loeb sentenced Brian to life imprisonment with minimum 12 years before parole eligibility. The judge stated it would unlikely ever be safe to release him. He noted psychiatric evidence suggested Brian's condition was untreatable. Brian would probably remain dangerous for life. The sentence reflected difficult balance. Law required consideration of mental illness, but the court had to protect the public. In 2007, Brian was at Swinfen Hall Young Offenders Institution. Then in 2016, after serving approximately 11 years, the parole board granted his release. The decision shocked many. The judge who sentenced him had suggested he should never be freed. As of today, Brian Blackwell is free. He is approximately 39 years old. He lives somewhere in the UK under parole conditions. His exact location is not public. His current activities are not public. Whether he has reoffended is not public. The system monitors him. Whether that monitoring is adequate remains unknown. The house on Sandy Lane where Sydney and Jacqueline were murdered has been sold. New owners likely know nothing of its history. Brian destroyed his parents. He destroyed his future. He destroyed himself, all to maintain a lie. Case number 4. Suzane von Richthofen. Halloween night, 2002. São Paulo, Brazil. 19-year-old Suzane von Richthofen disabled the security system in her family's upscale apartment. She unlocked the front door. She had planned this for weeks. Her parents slept. Within an hour, they would be dead. She had recruited her boyfriend and his brother to carry out the murders. Suzane wanted freedom. Her parents controlled her inheritance, her movements, her life. She decided they needed to die. Manfred Albert von Richthofen was a successful engineer, director of São Paulo's State Highway Company. His family claimed descent from the World War I Red Baron. Maricia was a psychiatrist of Lebanese and Italian descent. They lived in exclusive Brooklyn neighborhood. The family's wealth stood at approximately $5.5 million. They had high expectations for their children, especially Suzane. Suzane was born November 3, 1983. She grew up with every advantage: private schools, language instruction, ballet. She spoke 3 languages fluently. At 16, she met Daniel Cravinhos at jiu-jitsu class. He was from working-class background. He did not work or attend university. He smoked marijuana. Manfred and Maricia disapproved strongly. In July 2002, while her parents vacationed, Suzane invited Daniel to move in. When they returned, they were furious. They demanded he leave. Suzane proposed a compromise. They should buy her a separate apartment where she and Daniel could live. Manfred refused. She could do whatever she wanted once she earned her own money. That refusal may have been the final trigger. Suzane recruited Daniel and his brother Christian, 26. They discussed methods. They would make it look like robbery. Suzane would provide access. The Cravinhos brothers would do the killing. Afterward, Suzane would inherit. They would all benefit. On October 31st, Suzane took her 15-year-old brother Andreas to a cyber cafe. She wanted him out. She wanted him to have an alibi. Before leaving, she disabled the alarm and cameras. She unlocked the doors. She returned around midnight with Daniel and Christian carrying iron bars wrapped in towels. They entered the master bedroom. They beat Manfred repeatedly. Maricia woke and tried to help. They pursued her and beat her until she died. Suzane remained in another room during the murders. She heard everything. When it was finished, they staged a burglary. Then Suzane and Daniel went to a motel. The next morning, Suzane returned and pretended to discover the bodies. Investigators were suspicious immediately. The staged burglary was unconvincing. Suzane's behavior during questioning was inconsistent. On November 4th, police brought Suzane in for questioning. Her story contained contradictions. On November 8th, surveillance showed Christian purchased a motorcycle with large cash exceeding his known means. All 3 were detained. Under interrogation, Daniel confessed first, implicating Suzane as mastermind. Christian confirmed Daniel's account. Suzane eventually admitted her role. The confessions devastated Brazilian society. A daughter who orchestrated her own parents' murders. Evil disguised as young love. The trial began July 2006, nearly 4 years after the murders. The prosecution presented evidence showing Suzane initiated everything. The defense claimed manipulation. Psychiatric evaluations diagnosed narcissistic personality disorder. She was egocentric, lacking empathy, focused entirely on her own desires. The jury heard weeks of testimony. They saw crime scene photographs. They listened to confessions. On July 22, 2006, they reached verdicts. Suzane was found guilty. She received 39 years and 6 months. Daniel received the same. Christian received 38 years and 6 months. Under Brazilian law, prisoners can progress to less restrictive regimes based on good behavior. In 2015, after serving approximately 13 years, Suzane was granted semi-open regime. She could work during day, returning to prison at night. The decision sparked public outrage. Many believed she should serve full term in closed conditions. As of 2023, Suzane was released on parole after serving approximately 21 years. Brazilian law required her release based on time served and program participation. She is now free, living somewhere in Brazil under parole conditions. Her exact location is not public. Suzane has given interviews expressing remorse. She claims to have changed. She says she is not the same person. Many Brazilians remain skeptical. They remember the kissing at the police station, the birthday celebration days after the funeral, the complete absence of humanity. Case number 5. Tyler Flach. September 16, 2019. Late afternoon. A strip mall parking lot in Oceanside, Long Island. Approximately 70 teenagers had gathered. Word spread through social media there would be a fight. They brought phones to record. They came for entertainment. What they witnessed was murder. Tyler Flach, 18, with a concealed knife, stabbed Cassine Morris, 16, once in the chest. The blade pierced Cassine's heart. He collapsed on the asphalt. Blood pooled beneath him. The crowd did almost nothing. Some recorded video. Some posted to social media. Few called for help. Most watched. Cassine Morris died in that parking lot, while 70 peers documented his final moments. His killer walked away. Videos went viral. The case sparked national conversation about bystander responsibility and teenagers filming violence rather than stopping it. Cassine was 16, recently transferred to Oceanside High School. He was quiet but friendly. He played video games. He liked basketball. He was trying to make friends and fit in. He had been seen with a girl another boy considered his own. In teenage territorial logic, this warranted confrontation. Tyler Flach was 18, from affluent Lido Beach. In days before September 16th, Tyler decided a dispute over a girl required confrontation. He obtained a knife. He concealed it. He spread word through social media, ensuring an audience would be present. He wanted witnesses. He wanted everyone to see what he was capable of. The decision to bring a knife transformed this from a fistfight into something lethal. Tyler knew what knives could do. He brought it anyway. That choice revealed his intent. According to witnesses, Cassine may have thrown the first punch, but Tyler pulled the knife and stabbed Cassine once in the chest. Cassine collapsed. Someone eventually called 911. Paramedics arrived, but Cassine had lost too much blood. He was pronounced dead, 16 years old. The aftermath was captured on numerous phones. Videos showed Cassine on the ground. Videos showed people recording rather than helping. Tyler was identified quickly. The next day, police arrested him. He was charged with second-degree murder. The investigation examined why so many people simply watched. The trial took place in Nassau County in January 2020. Tyler's defense argued self-defense. The prosecution dismantled this. Tyler had concealed a knife before the confrontation. Even if Cassine threw a punch, Tyler could have left. He chose a knife instead. The jury found him guilty of first-degree manslaughter rather than murder. The distinction reflected jury conclusion. Tyler intended serious injury but may not have specifically intended death. In March 2020, Judge Teresa Corrigan sentenced Tyler to 23 years in state prison. She emphasized the senselessness. She spoke about Cassine's lost future. Cassine's mother delivered an impact statement describing the devastation. Tyler showed some remorse. Whether genuine or performative remained unclear. As of today, Tyler Flach is serving his sentence in New York. He is in his mid-20s. He will be in his 40s before any possibility of freedom. The case prompted discussions about bystander responsibility. Schools implemented anti-violence programs. Cassine's family established a foundation promoting conflict resolution. The work cannot bring Cassine back, but it might save someone else. Case number 6. Michael Skakel. October 30th, 1975. Halloween Eve. Belle Haven. Greenwich, Connecticut. 15-year-old Martha Moxley attended a gathering with neighborhood teenagers. She never made it home. The next morning, her body was found beneath a tree on her property. She had been bludgeoned with a golf club traced to the Skakel family, nephews of Ethel Kennedy. Despite evidence, no arrests were made for decades. Many believed wealth and connections bought protection. Martha was born August 16, 1960. She was bright, popular, well-liked. On October 30th, she went to a neighbor's house where teens gathered. Among them were Tommy and Michael Skakel. Martha knew them casually. She had no reason to fear them. She planned to be home by curfew. Her mother expected her back by 11. Michael Skakel was born September 19, 1960. He was nephew of Ethel Kennedy, widow of Robert F. Kennedy. His mother had died young. His father rushed and struggled with alcoholism. The household was chaotic. Michael struggled with learning disabilities and substance abuse from young age. The golf club used to murder Martha belonged to the Skakel family. Tommy was last person known to have seen Martha alive. But as years passed, focus shifted to Michael. He allegedly made statements to various people suggesting involvement. These claims would later become evidence. In January 2000, Michael was arrested and charged. He was 40 years old. The crime occurred 25 years earlier. The trial in 2002 relied heavily on statements Michael allegedly made over years. Witnesses testified he had confessed. The defense argued these were unreliable. Second-hand reports from people with questionable credibility. On June 7, 2002, the jury found Michael guilty. He was sentenced to 20 years to life. Appeals followed. In 2013, a judge vacated his conviction, citing ineffective counsel. Michael was released on bond. In 2016, Connecticut Supreme Court reinstated the conviction. In 2018, the court reversed itself again. In 2020, prosecutors dismissed all charges. As of today, Michael Skakel is free. Martha Moxley's murder remains officially unsolved. Dorothy Moxley spent 45 years seeking justice. She died in 2017 before the final resolution. The case raised questions about wealth, delaying justice. Did money protect Michael from accountability for decades, or was Michael innocent all along? These questions remain unanswered. Case number 7. Thomas Wei, Huang. July 4, 2001. Independence Day. San Marino, California. Police received a call from a teenager reporting finding his mother dead. Officers arrived at an elegant home in this wealthy suburb. Inside, they found May Haskell. The scene suggested extreme violence. The person who made the call was her 16-year-old son, Thomas. San Marino is one of California's most affluent cities. Families have high expectations. Pressure to succeed is enormous. Thomas Huang had grown up in this environment. His mother had remarried after divorcing his father. Conflict between mother and son had escalated over years about grades, freedom, control. On July 4th, the conflict reached its breaking point. May Haskell had built a successful life. After divorcing, she remarried and maintained her career. She wanted the best for Thomas. She pushed him to achieve. She monitored performance. She enforced strict rules. But the relationship had deteriorated significantly. What had been normal parent-teenager conflict intensified into something darker. Thomas Wei Huang was 16. He was intelligent enough to meet academic standards, but emotionally he was struggling. Teachers described him as withdrawn in months before the murder. The conflict with his mother had become the central feature of his life. Thomas felt trapped. He could not meet her expectations. He could not gain freedom he wanted. He saw his mother as the source of all his problems. The details of what happened were never fully disclosed. Thomas killed his mother. The method was brutal. Evidence suggested deliberation rather than sudden loss of control. After killing May, Thomas called police. He did not flee. He simply waited. When police arrived, he was cooperative. He admitted what he had done. The investigation was straightforward. Thomas had called police himself. There was no question about who committed the crime. Psychiatric evaluations found a troubled teenager under pressure but no legal insanity. Thomas knew what he was doing. He understood it was wrong. Prosecutors charged him as an adult with first-degree murder. The trial examined the relationship between mother and son. The defense presented evidence of May's controlling behavior and Thomas's desperation. The prosecution argued premeditation. In 2002, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. Thomas was sentenced to 26 years to life. Under California law, this meant he would become eligible for parole after serving minimum term. But parole for murder is never guaranteed. The parole board would evaluate his behavior, remorse, rehabilitation, and danger to society. As of today, Thomas Huang has served over 2 decades in California. He has appeared before the parole board multiple times but remains incarcerated. He is now in his late 30s or early 40s. He has spent his entire adult life in prison. Whether he will ever be released depends on assessments by parole authorities. Case number 8. Louis Daynes, February 17, 2014. A mother in Surrey, England, received a phone call that destroyed her world. Her 14-year-old son, Breck Bednar, had not come home. He said he was staying with a friend. She believed him. But Breck had traveled to Essex to meet someone he knew only from internet, someone who had been grooming him for months. Louis Daynes, 19 years old. Breck's mother had tried to warn authorities multiple times. Her concerns were logged but not acted upon. Breck Bednar was 14. From Caterham, Surrey. He was bright and sociable. He loved computers and gaming. He joined online communities where he met Louis Daynes. Louis Daynes was 19, working as computer engineer in Grays, Essex. He created an online persona as successful businessman running a gaming company. He cultivated relationships with teenage boys, positioning himself as mentor. This was classic grooming. He targeted vulnerable teenagers, built trust, offered validation, created dependency. Breck was impressed by Daynes' apparent success. Daynes spent months building the relationship. They communicated daily. Gradually, Daynes isolated Breck from real support system. Breck's mother saw warning signs. She contacted police. She provided information. They logged concerns but did not investigate. In mid-February, Breck told his mother he was staying with a friend. He took a train to Essex to meet Daynes for first time. Breck Bednar was killed. Daynes called emergency services the next morning, claiming self-defense. Forensic evidence contradicted every element of his claim. Digital forensics revealed months of grooming communications. Louis Daynes was arrested at the scene. He maintained self-defense initially. As evidence mounted, he eventually pleaded guilty to murder. The trial took place at Chelmsford Crown Court in January 2015. Justice Nicola Davies sentenced Daynes to life imprisonment with minimum 25 years. He will not be eligible for parole until 2039. As of today, he remains in British prison system. After Breck's death, his mother founded the Breck Foundation to educate about online grooming. Surrey police issued formal apology for failing to act. The case led to changes in how British police handle reports of online exploitation. The work cannot bring Breck back, but it has saved others. Case number 9. Lyle and Eric Menendez, August 20, 1989. Beverly Hills. Jose and Kitty Menendez were watching television in their den. Their sons, 21 and 18, entered carrying shotguns. Within moments, both parents were dead. Bodies so badly damaged the scene shocked investigators. The brothers stood to inherit $14 million. Jose Menendez had immigrated from Cuba and built himself into successful entertainment executive, earning $1 million per year. Kitty came from wealthy Illinois family and had been a beauty queen. The family appeared perfect. But according to testimony that would emerge, terrible things were happening inside that mansion. Lyle Menendez was born January 10, 1968. Eric was born November 27, 1970. They grew up in extraordinary privilege, but they would later testify about years of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. They painted Jose as monster and Kitty as enabler. These claims could not be verified. Their parents were dead. On the evening of August 20th, Lyle and Eric executed their plan. Jose was shot point blank in the back of the head. Kitty tried to run. They shot her multiple times. The brutality was extreme. After the murders, They drove to a movie theater and purchased tickets. When they returned home, they called 911 and performed grief. The investigation initially focused on Jose's business connections. The brothers inherited the estate and began spending lavishly. The breakthrough came when Eric's psychologist, Jerome Oziel, recorded confessions during therapy sessions. When Oziel's mistress learned about the tapes, she informed police. In March 1990, both brothers were arrested. The first trial began in 1993 and was televised nationally. Eric broke down on stand, describing abuse. The defense built narrative of trapped children who saw no escape. The prosecution presented evidence of planning and greed. Both juries deadlocked. Mistrials were declared. In the second trial starting 1995, the judge severely limited abuse testimony. The defense case weakened dramatically. In March 1996, the jury found both guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances. In July, they were sentenced to life without parole. The brothers were sent to separate facilities initially. In 2018, they were reunited at Richard J. Donovan facility in San Diego. In 2023, new evidence emerged. A former Menudo member claimed Jose had sexually abused him. Defense attorneys filed petitions for resentencing. As of today, Lyle and Eric remain incarcerated. Their petition is pending. A new generation has discovered their story through documentaries. Public opinion has shifted toward sympathy. The case continues to generate controversy about how the legal system handles abuse claims and whether sentences should be reconsidered. Case number 10. Randy Wood and Curtis Gamble. January 16, 1988. Houston, Texas. Daniel Leopold picked up two teenage passengers in his taxi. It was late in his shift. He had worked as cabbie for years without incident. The two teenagers gave him an address in a remote area. When they arrived, they attacked. They used a knife and screwdriver. Daniel was stabbed repeatedly. He died at the scene. He was 45 years old. The teenagers took his taxi and drove it back toward the city. They abandoned it and returned to normal lives. They were Randy Wood, 17, and Curtis Gamble, 16. Randy's family had money. They had not killed for money or revenge. They killed to know what it felt like. Daniel Leopold was 45. He drove nights to support his family. He had no connection to his killers. He was simply in the wrong place when two teenagers decided they wanted to experience murder. Randy Wood came from wealthy Houston family. Curtis Gamble accessed that world through their friendship. Together, they convinced each other they were capable of anything. In weeks before January 16th, they discussed killing someone. Not for money, not for revenge. They wanted to know what it felt like. They believed their intelligence would allow them to get away with it. They chose a taxi driver because the victim would be a stranger with no connection. They believed a random killing would be harder to solve. When Daniel picked them up, he had no reason for suspicion. They were teenagers. They seemed harmless. Randy and Curtis attacked with knife and screwdriver. The assault was brutal. Daniel tried to defend himself but was outnumbered. He died at the scene. The teenagers took his taxi, drove back toward city, and abandoned it. For weeks, they maintained the facade, but they could not resist talking. They bragged to acquaintances. Word reached investigators. Both were arrested in February. Under interrogation, they confessed. They described the planning, random victim selection, the act itself. They showed no remorse. Texas prosecutors decided to seek death penalty. Both were tried as adults and sentenced to death. The legal landscape shifted. In 2005, Roper versus Simmons declared executing anyone for crimes committed before age 18 violated the Eighth Amendment. Both had their death sentences commuted to life imprisonment. As of today, Randy Wood is at Caulfield Unit. Curtis Gamble is at Eastham Unit. Both are in their early 50s. Neither has been granted parole. Under Texas guidelines, they serve life with possibility of parole after 40 years. Daniel Leopold's family has consistently opposed release. The case is often compared to Leopold and Loeb, wealthy young men, superior intelligence, murder as intellectual exercise. But Randy and Curtis lacked even philosophical pretense. They simply wanted to know what murder felt like. They chose the most vulnerable victim they could find. a working man driving a taxi to support his family. They killed him for curiosity. 10 cases, 10 families destroyed, 10 young people who had every advantage and chose violence anyway. Looking across these tragedies, one systemic failure emerges with devastating clarity. Warning signs ignored. Breck Bednar's mother contacted police multiple times about her son being groomed online. She provided specific information about Louis Daynes. She explained her concerns in detail. She begged for intervention. Her concerns were logged as reports, but they were not acted upon with urgency. No investigation was opened. No contact was made with Daynes. No protection was provided to Breck. If police had acted on even one of those warnings, Breck might still be alive. Brian Blackwell's parents discovered his credit card fraud. They confronted him about the unauthorized charges. They contacted the bank to report the activity. But no broader intervention occurred. No mental health evaluation was mandated. No systems were in place to recognize that a teenager committing fraud to maintain an elaborate fantasy life might be experiencing a serious psychological break. The fraud was treated as a financial matter rather than a warning sign of dangerous detachment from reality. Thomas Huang showed clear signs of withdrawal and deteriorating mental health. Teachers noticed changes in his behavior. The conflict with his mother was escalating visibly. But in a community like San Marino, where success and perfection are expected, struggles are often hidden. The community saw only surface achievement. No one dug deeper to ask what might be happening behind closed doors. The pressure that was building had no outlet. Michael Skakel allegedly confessed to multiple people over the course of many years. Former classmates, people he met in rehabilitation programs, acquaintances from various points in his life. These people came forward eventually, but for decades, no prosecution occurred. Whether this delay stemmed from his family's wealth and connections or from evidentiary challenges is debated, but the pattern is clear. Information existed, action was delayed. The pattern repeats across all 10 cases. Adults who saw danger, who raised alarms, who tried to intervene, and systems that failed to respond with the urgency the situations required. Not because the information was unavailable, not because the warning signs were subtle, but because the combination of wealth, privilege, and normalcy bias created blindness. These were good families living in good neighborhoods, successful people in affluent communities, places where bad things were not supposed to happen. That assumption prevented action. When we believe certain environments are immune to violence, we stop looking for signs of violence. When we assume privilege protects against dysfunction, we ignore dysfunction when it appears. If we cannot recognize that violence can emerge from any environment, we cannot prevent it. If we cannot accept that wealth does not equal mental health, we cannot intervene when mental health crises develop in wealthy families. If we cannot overcome the bias that assumes good neighborhoods produce only good outcomes, we will continue missing the warning signs. The warning signs existed in every single one of these cases. Parents who noticed troubling behavior, friends who heard disturbing statements, professionals who documented concerning patterns, community members who felt something was wrong. The information was there. We collectively chose not to see it. We chose not to act on it. That choice cost lives. Breck Bednar died because police did not take his mother's warnings seriously enough. Brian Blackwell's parents died because fraud was treated as financial crime rather than mental health emergency. Thomas Huang's mother died because community pressure to maintain appearances prevented honest conversation about struggles. Cassine Morris died while 70 people watched because a culture of documentation replaced a culture of intervention. The lesson is uncomfortable but essential. We must recognize warning signs. We must act on them. We must understand that violence can emerge from any background, and we must build systems that respond to warnings with urgency rather than bureaucracy. These lessons come at terrible cost. We can honor the victims by learning them, by refusing to ignore the next warning sign, by intervening before the next tragedy. Wealth opened every door for these 10 young people, except the one that mattered most. The door to conscience, to empathy, to the fundamental understanding that other human lives have value equal to their own. Patrick Nogueira had family who welcomed him into their home. Brian Blackwell had parents who provided every material advantage. Suzane von Richthofen had privilege beyond most people's comprehension. Leopold and Loeb had genius-level intellects and unlimited resources. Tyler Flach had community support and endless opportunity. Michael Skakel had power, connections, and protection. Thomas Huang had potential and educational support. Daynes had technical skills and intelligence. The Menendez brothers had wealth, status, and every door opened before them. Randy Wood and Curtis Gamble had advantages and futures. All of them chose to destroy rather than build, to take rather than give, to inflict suffering rather than prevent it. The justifications varied across the cases. Some claimed abuse as their motivation. Some claimed fear for their lives. Some claimed intellectual curiosity. Some claimed love and the desire for freedom. But regardless of the justification offered, the result was always the same. People died. Families shattered. Communities traumatized. Lives destroyed. These cases span nearly a century and multiple continents. They involve vastly different circumstances, different legal systems, different cultural contexts, but they share fundamental truths that transcend time and place. Privilege does not prevent evil. Sometimes it enables evil. The belief that consequences do not apply to you. The conviction that normal rules do not constrain your behavior. The certainty that intelligence or wealth or social status provides immunity from accountability. These beliefs are always, without exception, wrong. These 10 young people learned that truth in courtrooms and prison cells. They learned it too late. After the damage was irreversible. After lives had been taken. After families had been destroyed. After their own futures had been obliterated. The victims of these crimes deserve to be remembered not as statistics or case studies, but as human beings whose lives had value and meaning. Bobby Franks wanted only to walk home from school safely. Daniel Leopold wanted to support his family through honest work. Martha Moxley wanted to attend a party with friends. May Haskell wanted her son to succeed. Breck Bednar wanted to pursue his interests in technology. Jose and Kitty Menendez, whatever their flaws, did not deserve execution in their own home. Marcus, Yanaina, Maria Carolina, and Davi Campos Nogueira deserved to build their immigrant dream in peace. Manfred and Marizia von Richthofen deserved to see their daughter's future unfold. Sidney and Jacqueline Blackwell deserved their retirement years. Cassine Morris deserved to finish high school and discover who he might become. All of these lives mattered. All of them were ended because young people with everything decided it was not enough. If there is meaning to be drawn from these tragedies, it must be this. We must recognize warning signs when they appear. We must act on them with urgency and courage. We must understand that violence can emerge from any background, any neighborhood, any family, and we must teach our children that all human life has value, that empathy is not weakness but strength, that conscience is not optional but essential. These lessons come at a cost, measured in graveyards and broken families. We can honor the victims by learning these lessons, by refusing to ignore the next warning sign we encounter, by intervening before the next tragedy unfolds, by building a society where privilege creates responsibility rather than entitlement. 10 cases, 10 cautionary tales, 10 reminders that wealth, intelligence, and opportunity mean nothing without humanity. Hey, Catados,